Howdys and Salutations, y'all, and welcome back to another Sif Stream style study. Let's see, I think the stream name should still be good. Let me double check that, and then we'll jump in here. Not too much setup on this one. Yeah, we're all good on title. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yes, not too much setup today, not too much background today. We'll just keep on keeping on, I suppose. So yeah, basically continuing our style study series. I don't know if any of y'all caught the last one, but if you didn't, this is basically, it's sort of a modern equivalent of the master studies when they talk about like a sculptor studying like Michelangelo or things like that, where you're looking to old masters who have the expertise and where you want to sort of try to learn not necessarily how they did their craft, but what specifically makes their style tick? What makes it work? Maybe a little bit of how they do it. And so I'm doing the same thing, but with more modern artists, like this excellent work by Kamome Shirahama, which is Witch Hat Atelier, which is a lovely series. Oh, hey, Galactic! Oh yeah, no worries. Like, have fun. A new Minecraft SMP is always a good time. Hope you had a good holiday and all that. Yeah. I'm getting back into the swing of things with art and actually doing drawing streams. I did too, it was good. My family's got a secret fudge recipe, and so I got to make it this year, which was it's always fun. I love being on fudge duty. It's not the healthiest thing in the world, but it is tasty. So we always love doing that. And it was also a nice break from some of the burnout that I'd had with the art stuff. I've been having a lot of fun with, like, actual like, working with micron pens and doing real physical drawing. But, you know, it's also given me a chance to have the energy to come back and do a little more digital stuff again and not just the My Sims binge. Although I did enjoy the My Sims binge, and we'll probably come back to that someday. We just got to star level 3, that's when the whole world opens up. So yeah, we'll definitely do more My Sims, but right now we're actually doing some art style studies, all that. And trying to get back in the swing of things with work and with all of this. So, let me see. They've got the stylus going. Excellent. Then, let me pull up. Yesterday, we did a recent, not the thumbnail template, the other one. There we go. The Rotenberg one, for better or for worse, was a little scratchy. But we were doing a study of, let's see, I can pop this open on Pure Ref, of some of the actual art from this one. Yeah, my overlay has been bugged out. I don't know what's causing it. I've tried a few times. Frankly, I think OBS had a corrupt update and I need to go reinstall it, because it keeps telling me that it's running every time I try to launch it, and it is not. So, yeah, well, that's why I didn't have much of an intro and probably won't have much of an outro either. Luckily, I still have the pause screen, but... the Ishtar Gate is still with us, but everything else, not so much. Didn't have a chance to debug it between yesterday and today, but I'll try to look at it sometime this weekend, probably, and maybe get it sorted out. And that one to the to-do list. Let's see... I'm actually going to literally add that to my to-do list so I don't forget about it. But yeah, so we're doing style studies on how this artist does architecture and then trying to apply some of it. And next up, today we're going to have a go at studying how they do faces. 6 overlays written down. Thank heavens for to-do lists. My brain doesn't store anything. It feels like I have to write it down or it is gone. So I keep like a notebook next to my bed, so if I wake up in the middle of the night with like vague memories of an interesting idea, I can write it down rather than just forgetting it. But yes. So last time we were studying that. This time we're going to study drawing people. Now we'll probably do this one of Agott later, but we're going to start with faces first, because faces are like a challenge all their own. Ah, yes, that does challenge things. I know, like, they make, like, bags and stuff that you can clip onto the side of those, but I don't know how well they work. Yeah. Got to be space efficient. Maybe I should get a loft bed. I'm probably gonna move soon, and, like, maybe that'd be a good way to free up some apartment space. Things to think about. That might actually be a good idea. I can put a lot of storage under that. Okay. Well, IKEA, here I come, but but another day. For now, we're going to, let's see, pull out the closest thing to a micron pen I've been able to grab. Yeah, having an actual, like, desk and a PC in the room and all in one place, that makes things a lot nicer. And I'm always, like, I don't know, there's always stuff I want to store. So, having a setup built around that would actually be pretty nice. That frees up some options, actually. I'm gonna have to revisit, like, apartment layout ideas now. Assuming I narrow down where to rent first. Apartment tours are such an adventure. And budgeting for them is a whole separate adventure. It would help if I used, you know, actual color. Or at least value. There we go. Now this still doesn't simulate like a micron pen the way I would kind of hope it would, but it's a start. I'm gonna have to go, like, properly chase down some better CSP pens. Another to-do, but that's okay. Because to-dos are usually fun, actually. They're not, like, chores. I mean, they are chores, but, like, being able to check it off makes it less bad. For me, anyway. Add that one on the tomorrow bucket. Okay, let's see. So faces are a whole separate kind of challenging from the rest of people. And frankly, still my biggest weakness, despite having put a considerable amount of effort into researching just them. But doesn't mean we can't appreciate the style, even if we, like, may struggle with proportions a little bit on this. Normally what I'd want to do is, like, kind of, well, like, get ourselves a general circle to work off of, try to figure out where in this circle, like, the center line of the face actually is, and then try to think through tilt a little bit too. That's not right. I can already tell that's not right. Really more like this. Doobie-doobie-doo. Yeah, I need to... Maybe that's the thing to practice, is getting these tilt lines more correct too. Right now this just looks like a sinking Elden Ring rune, but that's okay. But normally if we were constructing the face, I'd try to do this, and then, like, some pseudo-proco method, or looking... Trying to follow the edge. Like, make sure that we don't get it too rounded in the back, and all of that jazz. Such an adventure. But I'm not going to worry about that too much on this one, because this is a style study, not necessarily a proportion study. In any case, we don't even have the whole thing in view, so that does complicate stuff a little bit. So, you know, wow, that actually got better proportions than most stuff lately. Maybe I just need to revisit some of these ideas again. I was doing well on some Baldur's Gate sketches before. Maybe I go back to that for, like, face practice. That could be some good streams in the future. But for now, we'll just pop that over there, and I'm going to focus more on, like, the actual appearance of this face and a little less on the style, because having researched how this artist does her work, I know that she tends to do, like, pencil structure, like, very rough pencil underlays. They're not that rough. They're actually pretty polished in their own right. Before she even starts with the inking. And what we're really studying here is more the approach to inking and the detail, because that's... I don't know, that's the part that I'm really trying to focus on learning from right now. So, instead I'm going to look at general large shapes and then build off of those. So once again, sort of like with the buildings, I'm going to start by getting the large forms in here. Probably shouldn't even worry too much about interior forms, but I am going to, just because that's where the face actually is. So let's think of this. Let's see. That's too long. That's just the opening there, and then we've got that. Very loose there. And then, like, really not too crazy far down. Maybe just, like, 2 lengths, something like there. I'm noting, once again, we noted this one when we were looking at the buildings, but key parts, like the actual silhouette of the face itself, and the silhouette of the head itself, she just goes in with a heavier line, and just, like, has at it. Like, it's not so heavy that it's jarring or takes you out of the moment, but it's just enough to help guide your eye and improve the direction of focus a little bit. So, with the shape of the head generally outlined here, and for the record, this is Coco from Witch Hat Atelier, who's just... The series is just so wonderful. I've been really enjoying it, I've gotta say. And then, let's see. So now we've got kind of that outlined, and I'm trying to sort of compare the two side by side and make sure that I've got stuff generally in the right place. I'm going to move this... I'm just going to soften the curve and, like, the downshift a little there. That way it's not... Whoops. Not quite as harsh. Whoops. Actually, I think this one was a little closer. I just need to round it a little bit. Not a ton. Face shapes. You haunt me so. This is really, like, more square. Probably comes a little further out. Anyway, that's not the key thing right now. Now that we've got that one, I do want to think through just a little bit. We've got the face, and then I'm going to actually deal with the hair on a separate layer. And while we do this, we can think about some of the pieces that we noticed on the last stream of their style of shading. This one, I'm noting that there's a lot fewer crosshatch lines. All of the lines are shown flowing with the hair. The exception being there's very dense lines for the mouth and eyes where there'd be shadow or, like, eyebrow type details. But the hair itself is entirely just the sort of texture lines that go with the form. They're just arranged in a way to also give a little bit of the shadow. The other thing that's very noteworthy is when we looked at this last one, there's in addition to the cross-hatching, and we look in here and how scribbly this is, but in addition to the shading cross-hatching, which is not on the face, they also had this, like, actual, whatchamacallit, screen tone, basically. Like, the shadow screen tone. And the face and head have a lot less of that. Like, you see it under the chin, but the actual face, it's just not present at all. And before you ask, like, oh, well, maybe it's just a fluke and a weird image, this one's facing down, and it also has almost no screen tones. There's a little bit to emphasize that one eye, but Agott doesn't have much there. And this one, even though everything else uses that strategy still, none on the face, tiny little bit there. So with the faces, they tend to focus a lot more on keeping it clear and visible. Just because, and I'd guess that's because faces are so important in conveying mood and tone and, like, drawing the eye, that one, like, a little misplaced shadow can add a lot more meaning unintentionally to a mood. I mean, even, like, the classic, like, if, like, the eyes are covered in shadow, that has all sorts of, like, specific, like, mood implications for different art styles and things like that. So I guess that's mostly the reason for that, and so we'll also try to use shadows sparingly on faces. Because normally, you know, the hair would cast a little bit, but she doesn't bother with that. She just has the one bold line, and it's like, that's sufficient for this. So that's what we'll try to mimic in here. Let's see. Next thing, yeah, let's do the hair extension, not hair extensions, but the like actual, like how far the hair comes off. And let's actually look at how these lines are happening, because they're a little different. Got that. We've got, like, once again, we've got these bolder silhouette lines. For the actual edge of the hair. Let's see. And then let's look very, very closely at how these lines and the actual, like, hair strands are done. Because there are some shading contours there, but it's mostly... Well, I mean, no, they're all texture contours. It's just their arrangement is arranged in line with the shade, basically, so they kind of serve both purposes. Like, let's see. I've also probably gotten the angle of this slightly off, but that's okay. Oh, joy. See, this is... Why even is that? Okay, well, this is why I have the overlay. Yay! Well, that don't really matter. Okay. Yeah, okay. This really should be, like... Or there. There we go. Okay, and then just to get a little context, that swoop starts roughly here. And there's one pretty bold swoop that comes up and angles. Thanks, Steam Remote Play, very helpful. Got this one, then once again, I've probably got the slope of it a little too shallow, and the hair ought to actually be going higher up, but that's okay. And it comes out to here. Like, technically it extends further, but because it wraps around on itself, the artist has shifted into using some smaller strokes that we can see as it arcs back on itself. Curls into this, and wow, it's not getting the hair placement right at all. And once again, we've got it where it follows, like, the actual point is solid, and then everything leading into it are sort of these simpler strokes. Clean that up a little bit. Then we'll go through with the bolding pen later, but for now, we've got this last little curve, which has like a little bump on it, like it's catching on something. Anyway, got these, and sort of the layers coming out from the same place, so you get this overlapping texture going on. Okay, make some smaller ones. Right, we're gonna mess with line weight before we do those smaller ones. Main thing is just to have the hair silhouette right, so that when we come back to look at it later, we can deal with all of that in more detail. And so we can use it as a reference point for other pieces. Sometimes when I'm drawing from reference, I'll actually do the hair first, before I do the face. Not the whole hair, obviously, but like the silhouette, because it can help with placement of the features that can get a little jumbly if you only place them relative to each other. At least they can with me, because I'm still working on faces. Let's see, so once again we get this sort of... One of them crosses over. Alright, that one's there. Well, that's fine. Why? There we go. Yoop. What I mean when I say one of them crosses over is that we've got the main line here continues like this, and then the secondary line is basically branching off from it, but this main line goes from being on the outside edge of the hair to being on the inside edge of it, which is a good way to, you know, show that it has twisted in on itself, basically. That's just a good trick for basically any style. Mute this one down. Let's see. Outer edge ought to run into that one, so. Even in these small, very low detail lines, that's still the case. The crossing over, I mean. As you can see, we've got... right in here, we've got this little one that connects onto the main line, but also has, like, the alternative going this way and becomes the outer silhouette there, so it looks like it's twisting over in here. Basically. Not necessarily illustrated this particularly well, in this case, on my part. Well, in any case, we will continue on that a little bit later. Because what's important is I've got the stuff actually touching the face pretty much in place now. Okay, Coco, let's see. Let's look at the actual placement of features. And this is one where obviously doing that alignment stuff is a good idea. Man, every single time. I have a bad habit of putting that alignment line in just completely the wrong place. Like both times with the first and the second, I initially angled it this way. And I think it's because that's sort of the angle at the top of the nose is at, and that like the neck is at. So that's what my brain is looking at for orientation, but that's not actually like how faces work. That's something to pay attention to, is looking at like between the eyes and the mouth as sort of focal points, as opposed to like top of the nose where it starts to shift, and like this line, deceptive line. Okay, placing facial features when we're doing a non-structured, when I'm not doing like a Proco head or anything like that, and we're just trying to look at a ref, what I usually do for placing the features is from most angles I find it's easiest to start with the nose. And it is still easy to misplace it, but looking at the nose relative to the silhouette, I find it tends to be the one that has the least like mental assumptions about its placement. So it's sort of the least subconscious design baggage, for lack of a better word. Like with eyes, we have so many assumptions about how eyes work. And like, that's not, they're very unhelpful, and they make it hard to eyeball things, fittingly enough. Let's see. But let's see, because the nose is there, and then the nose peaks, like, here, before this really starts curving out, which is just... it feels too high, but I guarantee if we lower it... well, I don't guarantee, but it's very likely if we lower it, then we'll find out, like, oh, actually, we put it way too low. Just because of the way faces work. So yeah, this is ending, like, right above where the chin comes down, which is correct. We want to get this, like, a slightly softer curve. More of a, like that. And this one is more of a indent curve. It comes up to about there. Let's see. Honestly, somewhere between those two lines. There we go. I don't know why I'm fretting so much about placement on this. It's not really the key part. We'll build the roundness with the hatching here in a minute. And like mouth placement, yeah, it's like just below the apex of this curve. So if the apex is like the furthest out that it goes, mouth is landing somewhere around here. Top edge of it is landing just below there, like vertically with the nose. It's not terribly tall or terribly wide. Okay, so there's placement of those two features, and we can kind of get the placement of the other things from that. We know that one eye is going to roughly be there with a lower edge there. We know that one is going to be more over here in this upper quadrant, starting higher, roughly at the apex of that one, and starting just to the right of the mouth. And running all the way into the hair, which... already placement worries. Because that is too far. The bottom of it is lined up with kind of the middle of the nose and the bottom of the other side. There. Tag nab. Perhaps should have used actual proportions rather than eyeballing the hair placement. As soon as I start shifting around stuff like this, it's like all over. But we'll do it as a sample for this case. And in any case, I think that's more correct. Boop-a-doo. Trying to figure out what I was even... What were these arrows for? Oh, right, that was demonstrating outer versus inner edge of that strand of hair. Got it. Yes, okay. Now we've got this going a little higher and coming down over there. We've got this one coming into about there. And generally gives us something to work with. Okay. So all of that's not necessarily the focus, although, once again, proportions are a good thing, and always worth practicing. But let's take a look at how they're actually doing the line work on this. Because what she does, first off, we can get the big bold line. Which I'm just going to do in some segments here because we're using the vector layers, we can afford to take that liberty. And then this really is a pretty sharp edge, actually. And, I don't know, perhaps slightly too far down, actually. Once again, when I get the facial features in there, suddenly the whole silhouette's like, oh, actually you've messed up. But you have to be careful just adapting it to fit whatever features you have on there, because it could be the features that are in the wrong. In this case, I don't think it is. And the reason I don't think it is because I've been using the hair, because we have the hair here, I can use it as a secondary reference point, so it's not just that this looked wrong compared to the mouth, it also looked wrong compared to where it was landing relative to this strand, and this placement seems to resolve it for both, so I think that this is actually the more correct location. We've got our heavy line weight. The other thing we can put that heavy weight on is this particular hair strand. There we go, we can just do that. And then not erase it, hopefully. There's a few others that have that, like, heavier weight on them. Up and then taper out. There we go. basically anything that is a major silhouette component tends to. Like this hair strand will. And this one to a lesser degree. Even this one has it sort of along the inner line. And then, of course, down here as well. Counting this as hair, even though it's clearly not. But it is bonus accessory, basically. Okay, so with that settled, now we can look at where they're actually putting their finer lines. And what she's doing is... let's see. I suspect these aren't going to match Agott or Agott. No, not particularly. I guess just a little bit under here to emphasize like chin and like motion, but not a lot. What's really happening is it's not even like hatching for the most part inside of features like the mouth. Instead, there's like a couple simple lines, but then it's mostly like actual solid forms. Things like this. Fairly bold lines. Slight bump at the end of that one. In this case, I don't know how universal that one is, but this is the example we're doing our study on right now. I do recommend if you're doing actual style studies to look at a bunch of pieces of work and not just one. We're just focusing on one for the purposes of streaming and time frames and all that. Because if it's an artist you like, then, you know, you get to look at more of the art you like. So, like, it's not an unpleasant thing to do, really. We've got just a couple there, and then a couple of, I don't know if it's texture, because it's not really shadow on the nose. I think it is literally just texture in this case. A couple of stray lines there, but the main ones here that make this line so hard are like a little bit of shadow and a little bit of depth, just from some very close hatch marks over here. They also tend to give it like a softer curve. And as we get down here to the end of the line, there's a couple of free-floating ones too. But most of them are all real jam-packed in there. Get a slight lighter patch up here. And then basically continue back up into the slightly thicker part of this line here. There we go. I want this to look like it's continuous into the nose. It is a cross line. There we go. There we go. Now that's actually following the contour of the nose a little bit. So in a way, those are also functional as contour lines, which is good. But now we get to the eyes, and the eyes are always just fascinating. Fascinating amount of depth on them. With like she does really cool work with these. So we'll see if we can capture justice. Honestly, our pen might be too broad for this one, so we may have to go to a finer point. Because the way this is defined is we've got, let's do the lower edge and then the upper edge first. Lower edge kind of follows the contour of the nose a little bit. So like if I could line that in, which she might have done. We've got like the strokes there, but I noticed there's specifically gaps in here. Oops, nope, we want the eraser. Or rather the drawing a transparent line. It's fascinating how that works. And then there's also, beyond the solid form, there's always like a couple of continued hatch marks. The stray dot, usually. So that continues up here. We kind of got the angle. Then we've got the overarching one. So we can lose this line. The overarching one also ends in a flat edge here and then kind of tapers up in one stroke and then down in the other. Mostly solid, but you can kind of tell that it's possibly done more with like the repeated scratching lines, because there's always like a little one of the stray ones, and then there's these ones. Whoops. No. There we go. These ones following sort of the edge of like the, not necessarily the eyebrow or eyelash, like really the eyelashes. Like there's a couple of stray ones that follow that. like above the main darker form that comprises that. And you can see there's like a couple loose ones there, including one that arcs out beyond the edge of the face. In this case. Which you see a lot of times just because it indicates a bit of depth. Like having that continue off of the face gives it a better 3/4 view. I wonder if Agott does that too. It could also be because her character design has like a little bit of a flare on there. Yeah, no, Agott actually has really long eyelashes, so they've got a lot of depth to them. We'll get to those, don't worry. But inside is where it's interesting, because this is definitely a style where you would generally need to have the sense of what you're doing before you start doing it, or you'd need the ability to erase or white out over top, basically, to add the reflections and glints. Because we've got sort of one bold shape here, which with just some solid forms, and then this definitely feels like one of the more, like, it's not just done with one stroke, it's like scratched in like that, because you've got the little bit of white space on the top, a couple of hatch marks here. And I wonder, when she draws these, how much, like, because it's obviously intentional. Like, there's thought put into it, it's not just random. But I suspect a lot of the individual strokes are a little more randomized. Make that a little bigger. We've got the counter one up here, so we get the reflection there. We still get the general sense of the pupil and iris here, in the larger sense. And we look there, and like it does have a lot of texture and a lot of depth when we do it this way. We need to darken the surrounding lines a little bit. I'm realizing I made these like too narrow. There we go. That's better. And like it looks just like noise close up, so you need the sense of what it should look like. But when you actually zoom out, you're like, oh, okay. Mine's ended up looking a little flat because I think I see it. Because at this angle, this needs to be a concave curve, not like instead of bending in towards the eye, it needs to bend out. And then this one can be a little more overhanging. Like overhanging that way as opposed to this angle being dominant, we've got this side being dominant. And so that should give it, yeah, see that's better. This would be a good style for like Sage from Sonic Frontiers of all things. And then looking at the matching eye, actually looking at the eyebrow first, because the eyebrow is very lightly done, very quick loose lines. And then once again we've got this combination of a solid shape with a few hatch marks extending it where it sort of fades. But in this case the solid shape isn't filled in, which is interesting. And this continues along with the curve of the nose, basically. Like, I don't think that's even a stray hair. I think that's just, yeah. Okay. Then let's look at the other eye real quick. Again, all these things you have to check them in the context of the full shape periodically, or else you'll totally lose track of everything. Okay, so with this one we got some interesting stuff going on along the bottom curve. So once again we have this like solid form, which has a fairly definitive shape. No like weird stragglers, although it is continued with that. And then it's basically sort of echoed with these ones, which I think are again just like... Actually, I think they're symbolic of like the very slight blush of like awe, like impressive, because this is the first time she's seeing something. Like she's seeing the cool view of new potential friend, or just new person, showing up through the window flying. And so she's, you know, in awe of magic, which you should read the story and like get to know all the backstory behind that. But like that's also, I think, showing a little bit in these texture lines, or to emphasize kind of the like manga style blush. That's really extended beyond manga at this point. But it's also just like a little bit of texture and shadow where it does belong, so. And okay, what we've got here is something that I've noticed in a lot of their style too. We didn't see it too much last time. But you get kind of these like broken lines. Like this is probably like technically a solid shape, but we get like the broken up little edges here because it's not super deep and dark. And we will probably see more of that as we go. Looking at this, we've got... Hold on, I need to look at relative heights real quick. Yeah, okay, so that does just need to be higher up. And this one you can definitely see how in the curve of like the upper eyelid and shadow and all of that, it's not just like a simple clean block, it is done with the like repeated strokes. There's sort of an apex here above this piece. And once again, we've got the curve going this way. And with the ink pen, they can use pressure and stuff to actually like change on the stroke, but with this sort of micron one that we're using, we don't have that option so much. So instead, we'll just have to fill it in the old-fashioned way. Actually, the other way is probably the old-fashioned way. This is the weird modern way of having nice precision pens and technicals. We've got the large bump there, and then kind of mirror... Like, this is sort of like down here, where we've got the mirroring, quote-unquote, hatching. Except in practice here, it's almost merging into it because it's so close, because it's in comparatively high shadow. Fill that in real quick. And it goes right up to the edge with like a little bit more over there. And we see the curve is also built up because it's fairly consistent thickness throughout. And a little gap there, but not enough to be a noteworthy like piece of the of where they want the viewer's attention going. It's just like a little bit between the strokes. And once again, much simpler, lighter like actual eyebrows with just a couple of hatch marks, but not any closed solid shapes like we see on the eyelids. Okay. And then once again, looking at the actual iris and pupil, you can sort of see where like the full circle shape on it is. But because it's in the light and it's supposed to look, excited and all of that, but also it's in the light, so we're just going to be catching like fragmentary bits around the edge. There's a couple different shapes here. Some straight lines, some more scribbles, some like an arc like this. This one being, you see a lot of anime eye. I mean, even the, what's the famous like Among Us anime eye, where they've got this. Like, and like this becomes the reflection on like the weepy eyes. Like the reflection here, we're getting just like a little counter reflection. It'd be like including the backpack, basically. Among Us eyes. Shockingly not the worst tutorial out there. Because we're getting like counter reflection there. We're getting the main reflection here, which is so bright that it's obscuring a lot of the actual silhouette of the eye. Like you can see a couple of little specks there, and then like this bit where it picks up. But what we're seeing in the negative space is essentially the open like light reflection there. Getting like a third one up here too. I wonder what references they use, like she uses for eyes, and like how much of this is style choice and how much of this is actually observing and seeing like, oh yeah, that's how they work. There are reflections there. Because there's even like a few hatch marks to get. I think these are really more texture hatching, truthfully, because that is kind of how irises actually look. Then we jump in here into the main piece. Kind of arcs over there and ends there. And we've got the pupil here. I'm going to go ahead and fill it in and then erase out that one central line, because even that's got a little bit of glint on it. And it does still mirror the fairly square, rectangular pupil shape we've got over here, which is interesting. I've not quite got the eyes aligned the right way, so she looks a little bit cross-eyed. I think that's mostly because this one is actually too far to the left. I remember noting that even when we were looking at it, but I was like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Or too far to the right, basically. Really, it's just too small, and thus that's left it placed a little too far to the right. In practice, what I ought to do is expand it a little bit, and then scoot it here so that this particular piece is lined up roughly with the light gap. This edge here is coming almost up to there. The size is roughly matching the other one. And then I'll just need to update that one straight line, and we'll be set. Because I'd had to make these larger to compensate for it not taking up as much space. I'm happy to be able to fix that properly. Right, there we go. And we've got sort of our just light hatching there. And still a little cross-eyed, but better. Ah, faces. I mean, we could always move it even further in. Imagine before we moved the hair in and everything, how much more off that would have been. I suspect this one will be moving it too much to the left, truthfully. Got it selected, make sure we got both layers. Yeah, see, that's actually not bad. Of course, it doesn't solve the fact that she looks a tiny bit cross-eyed still, but it's better. And zooming out to actually see the effect of it, and like you don't see most of the individual lines there, but you do see like the individual space, like the negative space gaps for the highlights and all of that, and those do matter and show through. Like that's a big thing about like any Micron styles like this with the hatching and everything. The individual strokes aren't the focus. Like it's if you want to mimic a style, it's good to pay attention to how they do them because they do matter for perceiving texture and stuff. But they're not really like the primary point of it. However, like where the true patches of light and dark, the values and shadows, everything, those do matter. That's sort of the bulk of it, really. So, like, you've still got to be very precise with where you put the lines, because one wrong line can actually have a pretty big impact on the perception of an area as light or dark. Let's see, so we've got, this is interesting, actually. We have more of the just solid screen tone just on the chin. Not even in the hair, just on the chin. However, it's not just a solid shape, and it actually has some of these areas sort of interjected into it as well. Areas. It's got like the lines and gaps and stuff, which is cool. Of course, they are mostly parallel in that one, and then down here these need to be thinner strokes, so I should have used a smaller pen, but you know. Even for the screen tones, we're getting like a little bit of hatching going on there. That's really interesting. Just goes to show they don't have to be exclusive. But like even with just that little section, it does add a lot of volume and depth and shape to the face and head. But yeah, you can see moving on to some of the detail stuff around here. Like, even with these lines around... Yeah, okay. Around all of this. Like, that's not done using the screen tony shading effect. These are all done with proper hatching. Ah, and another example of the line continuing off into dots. I do love this. Something I'm definitely going to, like, incorporate into my physical drawing styles, too. Because it sort of helps the lines taper off. It clears up. There's not as much of a sharp edge on things that don't need a sharp edge. When something is just fading, it's a good way to show just that. There we go. I assume that's on, yeah, the wrong layer. Okay. We got this. And these are just catching, like, the creases of the fabric. A little bit of the shadow. This one's got a lot of like hatching for the shadow, but it is fairly haphazard hatching, just enough to create a dense area here. Same down here, really, although it's much less haphazard, but it's still mostly shading compared to a larger stroke border line. And then we've got kind of... If we zoom out, we'd see a little more, but this one really is a headshot. And you get sort of those patterns on the clothes. All of that's well and good. Right, this line shouldn't be there. Okay. Let's see. Wow. Time be flying. So we can look more at the line work on the hair. It's mostly done in these sort of patches of parallel lines. They're not straight lines, they're curved, but they follow the flow of the hair, and there's just like little patches where there are shadows or where a new strand starts. So we get like this one, and then it kind of extends and extends and extends, and it's sort of this repeating lines rather than just solid ones that adds a little more texture and implies a lot more strands, which is a really cool way to do it. This one we've got kind of like an incomplete hair, but you can still follow the path of this one, but it's not bold enough to be like a defined one in its own right fully. Just a couple hatches there. And then like here's one area where we get a few because there's a twist of hair here that's going one direction. And then we can kind of follow these ones through. Not one-to-one, but the general flow of the hair, the curve from this section into this one. But I don't necessarily, I'm not going to do all of the hair on this one, partly because, well, actually entirely because of time. If I had a little more time, then I would probably go ahead and do all of it, just because, I don't know, it's good practice. Alright, so kind of the center stroke is taller than the others. And it's got like a little bit of dots. And then that's, okay, one last thing to focus on while we're looking at the hair, and I'm doing this section. The part in the hair is implied. There's not actually a line here like a hair part here, but all of these loose ones, there's a lot of little loose ones next to it to help give it definition. Not necessarily loose hairs, but loose marks. That ought to be lining up with that one, but that's okay. But even the longer ones that extend further in are all ending at this point and curving in a little bit so that you can tell that it's there from the negative space. Alright, let's see. There we go. I'll get a little bit more on this one, just because it's right around the hair. Two arcing from this way, and then more continuing in this direction. Eventually merging into the side. So not up like this, but down. That's fine. This one actually merges way earlier and not into that one. It's kind of emerging from, but all of the hair strands flow into each other. Like they flow together, and they flow pretty fluidly. That's not to say they all have to be like exactly parallel and one like ending exactly into another like that. That would look a little stiff, but like you can see all of these ones together are flowing in the same direction, even if there's like a little bit of misalignment. And you can see when there's an intersection and like some of the different strands are there, you can tell the directions of the hair even if like they're not all perfectly lined up one-to-one. Okay. There's our reference there. So thinking about that, and I'm just going to do a quick look at Agott's hair, because it's very different because it's so dark. Mostly it's just the solid shapes. Let's see. Okay, we got plenty of space. Go down here for this one. Like we've got the shape, and that's actually her witch hat there with a little bit of hatching on that to give it like under edge curvature, some visibility, and a little texture. But mostly we're learning about this hair from its silhouette and the occasional stray like gaps in that silhouette. So you can see individual hairs silhouetted out, like a little bit there, curves out, and so on. I'm just looking at the outer edge right now with the sort of cascading curves, and then these lower ones coming in a little more, cycling over each other, and so on. But then I'm just going to like fill this in as a block, basically. Can't do that on this layer. Can do it on this one, though. Right. And then what we're seeing is basically little sections carved out of it, where we can see a little light through that give a little more definition to some of these hairs. So like this one's got, actually it didn't fill all the way, so it worked pretty well. But this one's got kind of an opening here in the negative space. And these openings are crisscrossed with other hairs still. Like, this one's not just full open, so we get the sense that there's a lot of stray hairs, which is true of Agott. I hope I'm saying her name right. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm still trying to figure out the pronunciations of most of the characters in this one, actually. They've got very unique naming schemes, which I love. Because they don't sound unique like Argoblath or whatever. Like, they're not just generic nonsense. But, like, they are very much, like, otherworldly, and it's kind of fun. Let's see. And so seeing this one, you can see that there's a clear strand there in the negative space that's blocking this larger opening, which is kind of neat. A lot of these you see as sort of a curved triangle shape. So like the negative space is basically shaped like this, where there's one hair that's sort of looping over the top, and it's implied there's a couple of different curls going on underneath it. Maybe overlapping, but they're all hidden in the shadows, so you don't know for sure. So you get that shape a lot. Always with like the longer edge kind of parallel in here to the outer edge of the hair. These ones are kind of crisscrossing triangles. Let's see. And so on and so forth. Like, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We're not doing a ton of depth. But you can see that even, like we haven't done a lot there. But it does still get a lot of depth to the face. Like, the face itself is also covered with these stray hairs. Which we're not going to bother getting into all that right this minute. Just want to kind of get a feel for it. Once again, nose higher up than I would expect. I think adding a little more curve to it, tapering it up. Like these counter curves. But that, yeah. The mouth, once again, kind of a simple trapezoidal shape. Not even trapezoid, that's just a triangle with a curved edge. But then, like, you can tell from the shading, like, where the light and dark is in it. So I'm going to have to invert on this one because of the pen I'm using, so that'll be a little weird. And then the matching sort of chin... There we go. This one's got a different view of the eyes, so we're seeing a lot more depth on them, which is neat. It's more full three-quarter view turn. But anyway... That's good on that one, I think, just for now, just for reference. So we're going to take a pause real quick. It's been a few minutes. It's been over an hour. And then we will go and, once again, like last time, try to apply some of the stuff we've learned. And I don't know that we'll get a full face done, but we may be able to apply some of the techniques and see, because the applying it, I mean... This is just true of any skill, really, but I remember Drawfee specifically called it out a few years ago, and their stuff's always pretty good on this sort of thing. But, like, you have to study it, and then you have to also apply it, or it won't stick. Like, I love just rote studying, but it's not that it only gets you so far, it just doesn't stay in your head as well. And, like, you won't be able to blindly, like, apply it in an important piece until you do, you know, try to apply it in some practice things. If you're just watching tutorials and not actually doing the exercises, you're learning, but you're not learning as much, as well, or as quickly as if you actually try to do it. But on the flip side, if you're going in blindly, you might have some luck, but you might also hit a lot of walls that you don't necessarily need to hit because someone else has already figured out good techniques for that sort of thing. So, like, it's a mix of both. It's a mix of studying something, so you're not reinventing the wheel, and then actually trying to do it so that you actually move somewhere and you're not just sitting there thinking about how cool wheels are. But we'll do the application part in the next bit. I'll be back in just a couple minutes and then we will continue. So I'll see y'all in just a few. Howdys and Salutations, y'all. And welcome back to the second part of the stream. We'll see how far we get on this one, of course. But let's see. Okay. So I figured Salt is a character where we already have a reference, obviously in a very different style, so we can't really cheat off the existing style much. But it gives us something interesting to work with. So, I figured it'd be a fun one to try with this. Let's see, oh yeah. I'm just paying attention to how they do chins. I don't know what it is. When I do chins in my own work, they're like super, like too soft probably. Like Salt doesn't have much of one. But whenever I'm like looking at a reference or real people, I always end up with them wildly over-exaggerated. So I know there's a middle ground there, but for whatever reason I can't see it. Like when I'm looking at the reference, I can't see what I'm doing wrong with the lines. Which means that it may not be the line itself so much as like line weight or relative precision or relative detail or whatever else. So many things to try and see and test and all that jazz. But not for the moment. For the moment, let's try to actually outline the hair. So sort of like this one, the face was outlined by the hair, and so we made it clear where the hair was. Let's try to repeat that once again with Salt. I'm going to first off get the one really bold strand here. I don't want it to be too bold because then we won't have space for anything else. Sort of. We'll get it like that for now. We may tweak it. I think we're probably going to want more detail going on behind the scenes a little bit. I do know, especially with her ear being more visible, that we'll have to actually, we don't have a reference for ears. I may have to check one of the actual like hard copy manga that I have to see if anyone's ears are visible in those. Okay, I can work with this. I've got Olbrugio, however you say his name. Cool. But I also want to make sure that we're actually getting the angle of the head right and all that jazz first, so I don't think I'm going to do the ear first. I'm also going to have to try to actually put Salt into slightly more human proportions, which will be a new challenge all its own. Let's see. Well, Salt's hair is fairly short, but it's not like crazy short. Still, I think we're going to have like a little more visible there. I'm going to go off the reference. But I'm also going to try to keep an actual like pretty... like... whoops. Yes. Looking at this one here and sort of seeing how the face is shaped and comparing it to Agott, although that one's a very rough facsimile, but trying to get something fairly similar, not one-to-one, but capturing Salt's relative, like, pudgy cheek faceness, while still having the major, like, curves in kind of the right spot for the face. And a fairly gentle chin. Because again, that's not really... Salt ain't got a lot of chin, and that's partly an art style thing, but it's partly just, what am I doing? New layers for Salt, because why would I not do that? Okay, retracing these lines real quick. Actually, this is a good opportunity to do the heavier line weight ones, because this one at least is almost certainly going to have that. There we go. Awesome. This isn't a vector layer? Why, brain? Why? Okay, well, whatever. These two lines will be on that. All the rest are going on the vector layer. Feels like the bulk of the cheek is like a little too low on that, so I'm going to try doing it more like this. And we'll see. Angle matters a lot for how much the chin sticks out, so if we're going in more 3/4, then, you know, eh. But as it is, it seems like we've got her facing up a little more, so we'll lean into that. I'm thinking, like, once again, the nose has been landing point, like, somewhere there. And mouth somewhere in there. Okay, like, we can work with that. Alright, I'm gonna... Okay, so that was all on the same layer then, and I just renamed it Sol by accident, which means that layer probably has nothing on it. Yep, okay. Okay. Wonderful lines we'd drawn. Oh well, easier to replicate the second or third time. Do that so that we don't make the same hiccup again. Keep that up there for now, it doesn't really matter. Okay. I think how that's going to land. I've angled this more than I intended to, really. I may just, Ooh. And that's also making me realize how janky that is. Okay. Joy of joys. Well, again, drawing faces is a challenge. We knew this going in, and the silhouette's not really the focal point of this. However, it is interesting. That's actually a useful reference. The sort of point where it's coming in towards the eye is aligned in a curve with where it's going towards the cheek. And I think the same was generally true of Agott as well. Yeah, in and then in. Okay, let's try applying that real quick before we throw in the towel on face shape and just give up for details. That said, I'm going to take the eraser, just clear this out, as it's not relevant anymore anyway. And let's just have a fresh go. On things other than weird, frustrating proportions problems, I've been sort of thinking, I'm trying to figure out a practical way to do this, or if there even is one. But now that I'm considering moving into an apartment, it's also making me think about sort of my other options again these days, and like what I could do. And given that my work is pretty flexible in terms of location, I've been pardon. In addition to the apartment, or perhaps in lieu of it, and this may be a thing, this is probably a thing to consider for the following year. So we do apartment, and then after lease we go do other thing. But, it would be fun to go do some actual travel road trip stuff out here again. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of places I'd like to go on just like art trip, basically. Like, just go out into, not into the wilderness, but into places with different, like, habitats and nature and architecture and all of the above, like very different from where I'm at right now, just to get a different see and a better feel for like the country and where things are and go places and all of that. By which I generally just mean that it'd be fun to have the option to go like do a week away at different places, and I'm trying to figure out a financially practical way to do that. Because it'd be fun to do like once a month to go do a week in like just a different city, or like to even just do a road trip and set up for like a month in a city and then a month in another city and so on. Kind of like Kiki's Delivery Service in a weird way. Which I just read the book for. It's a very charming book, but also just in general, like I'm in that weird point in my life where I feel like not everyone, but a lot of people after high school is sort of their chance for like, okay, I'm gonna go explore a bit and then figure out if I'm gonna do college or other things. These days, I don't know how much option people actually have, but I never did any like post-high school trip or anything. Because I was so focused on school. I was just academic all the way. Let's see. That was my jam. And, like, now I'm thinking, like, before I lock myself down into, like, apartment living and houses and all of that stuff forever, now might be the opportune moment. Wow, this is a look. Not a very salt look, but it is a look. Yeah. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to worry so much about face and proportions and all that. Let's look at individual elements and see if we can apply them for salt. Because I wherever that's going is just bad. All around, not great. Let's look at the hair, for example. The hair in the ear as just like a focal point study. Like this strand in particular. Because we've got this one, which I don't think would end up being continuous in the original. Yeah, no, it'd have like the sort of the point. And some following along with it, and some following along the length of the curve. Actually, I really ought to have those lines like on this one. There we go. And for the ear, I might actually have like another curl swell under here a little bit. Because that's the other thing, is these hairs have a lot more wisps and motion to them than I usually do. And part of that is, no question, a skill issue on my part, but there's something to work on. And now's the time to work on it, so why not? And let me pull out my old Rugio ref again. And, see about the... Wow, that's a lot of ear details. Which is no surprise, really. Got the general outline shape. Which even that, for... Actually, for salt... Hold on. Would continue further down, so it would be more visible down here, yeah. Or the jaw. Okay, yeah. Yep. Looks like in this case, a fairly simple, like, hatch approach. I'm just mimicking this one off of the cover with Old Rugio on Volume 6. More just filling in the shapes in here, really. Adding a little depth to it, but nothing crazy. And then like a little bit of texture, shadow, depth on that too. In Salt's case, is yeah, that's gonna connect to the chin eventually, but it's also a neck too. But we're also going to get a few of the more stray strands of hair going on here too. Like, there could be another one, like, kind of curling in. See. Big to narrow. Big again. Quickly. Ooh, right, we're on this razor. But yeah, so long story short, I've been thinking about travel and stuff, and I think it'd be kind of interesting. It'd be difficult to do the streams, though, so I'd have to think that through. What we'd be comfortable with there. And, but yeah, so I'm trying to think through travel options, because it'd be fun to be able to pop in from different places and do, like... Because, truth be told, and I don't know why I don't do this more on stream in general, but, like, I prefer physical art and I prefer landscapes, and yet most of my streaming is digital art of people. I've made some interesting choices. But, let's see, I'm gonna put these ones into another folder real quick. And just call it Studies. I'm gonna call this one Applied. Bits and bobs. Okay. Now I can hide the study ones for a minute because we're running into it a little bit, but I obviously don't want to delete them. Okay. At some point this is going to run into the hat brim. That's what I'm having to think about, which, funny enough, in the actual story would pin Salt as not at all a trustworthy character. Funny how things work out. This story does have such a unique take on witches and like magic, though. It's really, really charming. Yeah, no, I need to add a little more depth to that. Salt does have crazy wild hair, too. Okay, yeah, there we go. Need to think about where the back of her head's going to be as well. Some of this is also going to get, like, forced down by the hat itself. Rather wide. The fact that these are all ending at the same point is part of the reason that's looking jarring. Okay, let's work on that a little bit. I feel like the top part on this just needs like a little more form to it. Okay. I had to do a style study on Olrogio's hair too, actually, because it's definitely a shorter, straighter approach. Well, it's not really that short. It borderline covers his eyes now that I look at it. But it is long, straight, or like medium-length straight strands. That might be something to look at. I have to think about how to handle some of the larger chunks, because they are still individual hairs, so we'll see. Yeah, this other one up here is Going on its own layer. Calling it cylinder. Cylinder to align and gin. I'm definitely not going to remember what that means. But, you know, one can dream. Okay, and I have to think about fabric, because the floppy hat has a lot going on. Well, we could sort of mimic what we saw on Agott's, which is this curved edge, which could eventually fall into a little more shadow. I'm going to try to stay true to the shadow on our ref so we don't repeat last time's weird shadow hiccups. A little carried away on some of that, that's too much, but, you know. Oops, nope, I'd like to... Actually, no, this is better. Kind of our cross-hatching happening there, so we're getting some deeper shadows. Contrast things. Of course, normally the hair is pretty dark on its own, so you actually wouldn't want too deep of shadows to contrast it. Then we can go back to no, we'll need our own shade layer on this one too. Shade. We can grab from this one. And we can try to learn from it a little bit. Even though we don't have the full neck here, we do have some areas that could benefit from the actual chin shading. Clear up a little bit in here too. Okay. And I may not texture this one as much as we saw in the reference here. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. Okay, but going back to our bits and bobs. And also look at a couple of lines that would probably be a little more heavily done. These ones don't need to be crazy, but you know, that one would probably be, yeah. I don't know if they'd bother with these ones as much. But it just gives it a little bit of pop. Okay, thinking through these hair strands a little bit. And the hat too. Those ones got a little too stray. Same pivot point. And honestly, even that's like, this one's too far. Gotta have our patch here, else it wouldn't be salt. Well, perhaps slightly less cartoonish in this particular iteration. Okay, and then, yeah, I can tell I probably need to wrap up soon, just because, like, kind of petering out on conversation topics. It's, I don't know, it's been a very, very boring couple of days, truthfully. I might like to work on a little bit, getting into tomorrow a little bit, but, not a lot of eventful things to discuss, I'm afraid. Also, I'm not at all in the zone, which means that I'm having to actually, like, focus a little bit more on how we're doing some of this stuff. Which is fine. Like, one of the big things in learning how to do, well, anything really, is learning how to still do things even when you're not in the zone or mood exactly to do them. But it also means that I'm not massively entertaining right now. This is actually looking really cute. Like, I don't know that we'll be able to finish the face here, both for time constraints and for energy ones. But, I'm liking what we have been able to apply so far, even if not all of it has been quite applied well. Some of the bolder lines, but again, not going too crazy on those, trying to stay fairly lightweight. The other thing I totally didn't even think about. That's going to drape down in front of it. Whoops. One more line than I meant to there. That's okay. This is one of those ones where you've got to figure out where the eyes go first if you want to draw stinking glasses. I'm not going to be able to even get the angle right on those. But she will have glasses. If we ever finish this. Because, like, I don't know, this is just spitballing. This is definitely not going to be good for that half of the face. We're not really set up for that. This was supposed to be an odds and ends type deal. And as an odds and ends type deal, I'm actually quite happy with where it's landed, weirdly enough. I mean, I could do a little more hatching on the hat, or a hatching, if you will, just to really help it contrast. But I don't know that that's going to contribute a ton. And, yeah, I may actually wrap it there. I know it's a little bit early, and we had a little late start because of, well, dinner timing and tech issues and a few other things. And, like, I know it's not a finished face, but I'm really, really liking how the hair's looking. And that was, I think, sort of the trickiest bit. I mean, I can always try to do a little more of this, but I suspect the answer is going to just have to be, like, individual strands, really, and, like, different ways to make them... See, those are too monotonous. Different ways to make them a little more interesting and not overly parallel. And to have them still tie into the overall, like, curve of the head and the hat and everything. So the lack of a clear hairline is, you know, a problem here. But, it is a start. Get a few more under there just because it would be where a lot of the shadows are actually happening, and yeah, okay. Okay, I think that's good enough. This feels like one of those things where I can spend a couple more minutes to tamper with it just enough to break it, or I can not do that. And, like, maybe actually have something that would be, kind of fun. Well, in any case, I think, yeah, that's where we're going to leave it off for tonight. Unfortunately, I don't have an end screen or anything to send y'all to, because of the aforementioned overlay whoopsie doodles. So instead, I'll just bid you all a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, night, 3 a.m., whenever it may happen to be. And I hope y'all have a wonderful time, and then I'll get to catch y'all on the flip side. See y'all then.